you look at the number of students defaulting on student loans. I mean, of course, if you're look at today's world, you go to the grocery store, people are putting groceries back on the shelves. What payment are they not going to make first? That student loan payment becomes the first one not paid. And then you get penalties, and then you're accruing interest on interest. And you see people in their 40s and in their 50s. I mean, people still in my generation that I know are still paying off their student loans. That's before the expense of college went parabolic. So this next generation just has this huge debt burden, such that it's discussed on, usually the second date. How much do you have? Not, you have none? Oh, you must have come from a lucky family that could afford to pay. And that's the real other problem that it's creating. It's now creating college as a class system.
Welcome back to Metals and Miners. I'm its founder and its host, Gary Boehm. Today we have a dynamic discussion lined up and are fortunate to have with us David Bradshaw. Dave is a CPA, MBA, author, and business owner. He's joining us now to discuss his recently published book, No Second Chances, a family guide to the college decision and the lasting impact of debt. David, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Gary. Appreciate being here.
Yeah. So let's begin our discussion with the American dream. You wrote in your book, No Second Chances, but for some time now, the faith in the American dream seems to be contracting. The entrepreneurial spirit is diminishing, and the knowledge of what has been allowed for American exceptionalism is no longer being shared. Would you speak into your thoughts there?
Absolutely. The kids today, and I think it's in the financial world, probably best described into the terms of financial nihilism, are just finding it a tougher world to come into in terms of trying to fulfill that American dream of, being a business owner, being an entrepreneur, and just pursuing their dreams. And a big part of that starts with, we don't do financial education in primary school. And then we send kids off to college where we put them in loads of debt, and they really find a hard way to get out of that debt, and they don't understand it when they're getting into it. And unless you get a STEM degree, for the most part, that degree is probably not worth what you paid for it. And then they don't understand the cost structure. And at the end of the day, then they come out and now they have to deal with, super high home prices, inflation, and all the rest of it tacked onto that super high debt load. And I don't know anybody that doesn't have some friends and family that are struggling with the student loan debt repayments and wish that they didn't have them. And one thing I'll just say about student loans that is the first thing you need to know is nobody wants more of them.
Well, that's true. And for generations, it's always been the next generation is doing better than the previous generation, but that seems to be stopping now. That seems to be reversing because of the high cost of everything and really the debt structure that everybody is buried under.
Yeah, the fact that they don't really understand it. I was just listening to another podcast the other day with a professor on, and he said he brings this up to his students that, this debt's not dischargeable in bankruptcy, and most of them don't understand that. So we're putting 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds into forever contracts on large amounts of debt. I mean, the average state school now in Colorado, if you go to Colorado State or University of Colorado, you're looking at $120,000 for a tuition and room and board for 4 years. That's the second highest number a family's going to spend on anything. The next one being a house. So it's an extraordinary amount of money. And we all know how, it's great when you're getting the compounding interest, but when it's going the other way against you, we end up with financial nihilism.
Yeah. So all of this is leading to it seemingly a change in spirit, a change in dreaming that is for the next few American generations, including those in college now and those who are going to get ready for college now. What do you see as far as this change in spirit? What kind of impact is this going to have?
Well, I think overall higher education is kind of having its emperor's and new clothes moment, between the presidents going before Congress and embarrassing themselves over free speech on campus, students coming out of college knowing less than they did in previous generations, being less prepared for the job market, and the cost being ridiculously higher. You add all those together, and that is not an environment for everybody to succeed and do well, much less, again, care how much that they have that opportunity, right? Once that opportunity feels like it's been taken away from you, once that real piece of hope is taken away from you, it becomes a real struggle to try or want to do more. And I think for most of us, we go out in the world today and we see higher prices and worse service. And I think the worse service part is because most of the people providing the service feel really stuck. Like this economy has them stuck. This QE economy we've created over the last 15 years has not been good for anybody except for the super rich people who have all the assets that have risen in prices. Everybody else is really struggling. And I think it's just a matter of time before, and I think families are already doing, I think there's a harder look at education now, the harder look at that price. But at the same time, we need tons of people to go to school. We need engineers. We need nurses. We need a lot of these things. But then there's the whole other side of the school, with a bunch of sociology degrees and soft stuff that doesn't repay its loans. And the students aren't aware of this. And our lack of financial education in this country just makes it really hard for a lot of families to understand this. And that's what brought me to this and why I'm doing it and why I'm trying to, help educate some more people to just try and keep them out of this debt loop cycle.
There's certainly a lot of psychology behind this. Those who are trapped under the debt, those who don't understand it, those who don't realize what they're getting themselves into. And I think you're articulating that really well. Let's talk about the debt now that you're talking about. Every generation is taught and modeled and shown that debt is the way to a good life and to get what you want. You want the car, take out a loan. You want to go to that school, take out a loan. You want that house, take out a loan. But debt is the worst of things when trying to start your adult life and your career. Would you dive into why that is and how it could really set somebody back?
Well, it really starts with people aren't very good at math. Unfortunately, again, we don't really teach people about the math of debt repayment. And most students, if you went and asked a junior in college right now who's borrowing money, and you say, when you get done with college, what's your payment per month going to be? I would say 90% of them cannot answer that question. They haven't done the math. Because I've wondered for a long time, why aren't the students on campus just protesting? Why aren't they super upset? Why aren't they taking over administration buildings demanding that tuition come down? And the reason is because they don't get the bill until 6 months after they're done with school. And then they get that first bill and then they go, uh-oh. And now I have that problem, and it's too late to do anything about it. And so, debt as a business owner is at sometimes a requirement, right? Like you need debt to go finance the things, but you want to make sure that cash flow is going to support that debt. And we no longer teach that cash flow needs to support that debt. And what is that cash flow going to be? And have an honest assessment of what job am I really going to get? What is that really going to pay? And every study with all of the kids, they're super optimistic and super unrealistic in terms of the amount of money they're going to earn, and then not understanding the amount that they're going to have to pay. And once you start in that cycle, right, you get out of college, you feel like you've earned a better life. Now, all of a sudden, you start spending your money on credit cards, and then those interest rates compound, and now all of a sudden, you've got all the multiple facets of debt keeping you from having the opportunity to actually save money, which then after that's the only real key to you want to do anything on your own. If you owe, you can't do any of that. And I think it's just a shame that we do this to all of our students and meanwhile charge them high interest rates while the Fed buys bonds to fund the government at whatever low interest rates they want to do. But the students have to pay a real interest rate.
All of this stuff has been modeled for several generations now, in my opinion. I think our grandparents are the last generation really that were taught to use cash to pay for things. They came out of the Great Depression. They understood the value of a dollar. They understood what debt meant as far as impact. But for some reason, I don't know if it hasn't been modeled and taught after that, or I don't know if society just got a hold and has, really through the marketing efforts and through the sales efforts has really pushed the, debt as a way of life. but it has really gotten a stranglehold over things. David, I want to give you some numbers that you share in your book, No Second Chances. 3.7 million graduate high school, 2.5 million start college, 1.4 million graduate college, and 1 million default on their student loans. That big of a number, the default number, sounds like a crisis. And these kids, they're just beginning their adult life and they're starting out in crisis. It almost seems like as if we collectively have been expecting the kids to make the right financial decisions without the right financial education and guidance. How can we effectively educate young people about financial management and decision making to prepare them for adult life so they don't get themselves in these circumstances and we could reverse some of these horrific numbers?
Oh man, if you got the answer to that one, that's a very interesting one there, buddy, because I put out this book and I sent it around to my friends and family, and one of my sisters, who is a teacher, sent me back and said, "Can you fix our school system too?" And I was like, "These things are way above my pay grade." But this is just it. We're failing the students at every level, and college is just kind of the last big piece, but it's also the piece that is going to matter for the rest of their lives. This idea that we're not going to let them discharge in bankruptcy, that this is the decision that you make that follows you for the rest of your life, is just frankly unfair. I mean that's just what it is. And then now they're a political football for votes, right? Everyone's saying we'll forgive your student loans if you vote for us, right? Which also is just a terrible, terrible thing. So yeah, if you look at the number of students defaulting on student loans, I mean, of course, if you're look at today's world, you go to the grocery store, people are putting groceries back on the shelves. What payment are they not going to make first? That student loan payment becomes the first one not paid. And then you get penalties, and then you're accruing interest on interest. And you see people in their 40s and in their 50s. I mean, people still in my generation that I know are still paying off their student loans. That's before the expense of college went parabolic. So this next generation just has this huge debt burden, such that it's discussed on, usually the second date. How much do you have? Not, you have none? Oh, you must have come from a lucky family that could afford to pay. And that's the real other problem that it's creating. It's now creating college as a class system, right? Can your parents afford to get you out of debt when you come out, which is your real leg up in the world? Not being behind, versus everybody else is now stuck behind, and then they're on their hamster wheel, and it really looks like entrapment. When the U.S. was founded, we thought indentured servitude for 7 years sounded like a long, terrible time. But we're talking about the same thing economically for the rest of their lives, potentially, So it's just a terrible thing. And they're not trying to educate the students on finances, and we're not trying to tell people how money really works.
So something really needs to be done here, but you talk about a path to prosperity in your book. What should we be teaching kids in order to get them on that path to prosperity?
Well, we've got to teach them. We've got to put the example in front of them. What are you really after here? What is college about? And I think this is hard because I feel like all of the parents of the Gen Xers, the college experience for them and their parents was this coming of age. You go off to college, you learn how to grow up and be an adult away from home, as well as get the great college education, and do all the things. But when the cost blows out, all of a sudden that dream is very different and the consequences are very different. And so I feel like at this point, you just need an honest assessment of what you're trying to do here. It can't just be hey, we're going to go spend $120,000 on the coming of age experience, which will then haunt you for the rest of your life. Like, that's not a good decision for anybody, because that's going to cause other problems. Then you're living on your credit cards and you have that debt, and then you end up in this financial nihilism, and then you're stressed all of the time, and stress causes disease. And now all of a sudden, you're physically bearing it as well, even though you don't know that's what it is.
Of course,
and
the
it just
risk
goes
is
on
much
and on.
higher if you lose your job. I mean, you're putting yourself in grave risk if you lose your job.
Well, you just have no margin for error when you're carrying around that kind of debt. I mean, if you're a business owner, right? Let's take this out a step and go, okay, now you're the business owner down the road, right? When you go looking at setting up your own business or starting it, you got to go to the bank. And for the bank to lend you money, you have to show them how that's going to cash flow and give it to you back. And if we had a free market in college, then the people giving the loans would be doing the exact same thing with the students. They would be looking specifically at what degree are you going to get? What are your grades? What are the likelihood that you're going to succeed? We'd have actuaries in there like we do with life insurance, where, these guys are like within a 0.2 of a year of when you're going to die. They're so accurate, it's frightening, and then for the college kids, we just go, nope, we'll give everybody money. And so there's no price discovery, which means we're not having people go into the fields that we really need. And then a lot of these kids are allowed to just borrow tons of money for a degree that's not going to pay off. And so the reason that I put this together the way that I did, it's just asking the questions, is because I don't have an answer. And again, no college is not an answer for everybody either. We need a lot of college graduates. We need them in STEM and math and nursing and other things where we have shortages. We need people to help grow and build this economy and make things. But at the same time, we're telling everyone to go to college, and everyone, you can just take out as much debt as you want. And that's just a terrible, terrible system. And, we're all living through this great debt bubble of, borrow for infinites. You know how you get out of debt, according to the federal government? Borrow more. So, it's no wonder that the kids think the same thing. Like, they're probably teaching modern monetary theory in grade school now, of like, no, you just keep borrowing. It's fine. No problem. And I think we're all about to suffer through that next period of MMT repercussions. I think we just got the first wave of inflation, and we'll see what happens, but we all know they're likely to turn the taps back on.
Yeah. And debt to repay debt, I guess if you don't know math, I guess it can make sense, but debt to repay debt never works.
Never works.
Never works. So you started, David, talking about some consequences of debt for individuals and households. I heard you mention some physical things that could happen, the burden that you're carrying. What are some of the other things? I'm thinking psychological, I'm thinking relational. Can you dive a little bit deeper into consequences of a life of debt like this?
Well, let's put it this way. The easy way is to say you can't get ahead if you're behind, right? You haven't even got to the starting line of trying to get yourself ahead, right? You're trying to save for retirement or, whatever it is that you want in life. And from an entrepreneurial perspective, if you want to start your own business, you need money. So you need to be able to save. And if you're in debt, you're never going to be able to save because you have to first get out of debt. And so I feel like that debt burden has now become the caste system of the US. And so if you graduate college with a bunch of debt, well, guess what? You're now a worker, and you don't have a choice on which job you're going to necessarily take. You need the money to repay your debt. So you lose out on choice of job. You end up with more stress. And I put in there an example of what I would put an ACT question and go, okay, well, stress causes disease and debt causes stress. So therefore debt causes disease. And I don't know how you can't make that link. Like, that does not seem, that's not causation. And that's what debt does to people. And then psychologically, if you never feel like you're going to have that opportunity, to go take the risk you wanted to open the business you wanted to. And when you talk to people in their 60s and 70s and you say, what's your biggest regret? It's not the things they failed at. It's the things they never actually took the chance at. And when you're in debt, you don't feel like you can take that chance because you're so far behind already. If that chance fails, then you're just further behind. And so you end up stuck in this place of what you want to do versus what you feel like you can do. And it's not good for America. That's not good for entrepreneurs. That's not good for solving problems.
I'd imagine it's also not good for relationships. I would think that, when you look at 50% of our marriages end in divorce, people are so willing to walk away from relationships, steamroll over relationships these days, destroy people, just destroy people that they were, either family or friends with for so long, whether it be in person or social media or whatever. I when I hear you talk about the stress, and the origin point being the debt is the caste system of the US. How many people are feeling this level of pressure internally, and it's coming out, not only in their health and in their psychology, but also in their relationships.
Well, you see it with the birth rate, right? The birth rate's dropped off to the lowest that we've ever seen it in our lifetimes, right? Well, why do we think that is? So while inflation's hitting us on the one side and the cost to have a child goes up, on the other side of that, well, you're in debt and you're trying to get out of that. And together, you even get together and you're then trying to figure out whose debt is whose and how long that's going to take to pay off. And people take a lot of jobs like with government for their, well, I'll have to pay for 10 years. And a lot of students don't have a financial education. So they get done and they go, oh, well, you can go on this repayment plan that's a percentage of income, not realizing that literally their debt is growing, right? Because they're not even making enough to pay the interest. I mean, they're not paying in enough to pay the interest. And then you're in the doom loop, right? And again, not dischargeable in bankruptcy. So you're praying for a politician to come by and give you a deal, praying for a vote. It's just so sad all around, honestly.
It really is. So the young adults coming out of college seem to be getting prepared to do their job, to have their career. They go to college, they acquire their skill and everything that's associated with that skill, and they take that into the workplace and they do their job. I mean, when I go into the hospitals or whatnot, I mean, there's young people in there and they're doing a good job. But are students being adequately prepared for life after graduation? Life. I'm not just talking job, I'm talking life. And what changes can be made to improve their readiness?
Well, that one's over my pay grade, buddy. That one's a tough one. The fact that they've come up with the word adulting probably tells us what we need to know. But I think part of this as well is more and more kids are getting a later start in life in terms of working. And there's the one facet of it where you could say, I go to work to make money, right? But if you read like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, where his rich dad said, I'll give you a job, but I'm not going to pay you. I'm going to make you figure out how to make money on your own. That skill set is worth 1,000 times more than me paying you. And you learn things working about how to work with people, how teams work, how groups work. And so the sooner you get into the workforce, the better. And of course, we've done more and more laws to protect children and probably gone way too far over so that now we can't have them work. And a lot of young adults want to work and want to contribute back to society. They're ready. It used to be, 200 years ago when you were 11, you started your craft, right? You started who you were going to apprentice with. Now you got kids coming out of college, never had a job. So if we needed the word adulting and we have kids without real life experience, that life experience is going to help you. And as an employer, if you come to me after college and you say, look, I worked my way through school, might have taken me a year or two longer, but I don't have any debt because I worked the entire time. I worked to go get what I have. That skill set versus a person whose parents paid for the whole thing or who they borrowed the whole thing and has never had a job, that skill set of that person, they are so much better prepared for the workplace than the people who haven't worked. And it just takes a long time to develop those skills. So it's the sooner you start, the sooner you get there.
Unless they're being trained like that at home. So
always the possibility, Yeah.
So David, you did a podcast on the student loan debt issue that you titled Understanding How the Student Loan System is Actually Set Up Against You. Would you give us the 10,000-foot view on how the student loan system is really set up against the loan taker?
Well, we could start with the fact that they call it aid. And I don't know how many times you've taken out debt, Gary, but I don't know any banker who has ever come to me and said, here is your debt burden aid. So I think just as a semantic difference, right? When you're at the college and they say, oh, well, it doesn't matter how much your family can afford to pay. We have an aid package to help you. And that aid is debt. That psychologically already just doesn't make any sense. And you start with that and you go, all the steps set up along the way is the schools are not doing the best thing for the students, right? Instead, they have sales teams designed to get more students in the door, and it's really almost like the car industry. If you go talk to a good used car salesman that none of us like, they'll tell you something like there's an ass for every seat, right? And the colleges now treat kids the same exact way. These are numbers that we need to hit. We need to bring them in. And the entire system is telling you from the time you're in grade school, you need to go to college to be successful. Well, if your family can't afford it, then here we go. Meanwhile, the tuition cost has gone up way more than inflation. And here, we'll give you debt to do the whole thing. And we won't have any price discovery with that so that you'll actually have a good understanding of whether or not you're going to be able to pay that debt back when you graduate. So get whatever degree you want. We'll expand our humanities departments and give all of these kids degrees that really won't serve them in the future, and they won't be able to earn enough to pay back that debt to make it worth going to begin with. And that's the entire system from a 30,000 foot view. Is it's not there to serve the student, which it should be. Most of our schools are land grant institutions that are set up by the states. These should be serving the students. But instead, you have even Stanford puts out all the words you can't say. And someone goes and looks behind the scenes and goes, how many administrators does Stanford have to have all of this time to put out all the words we're not allowed to say? Oh, they have more administrators than students. So no wonder the cost is so high, right? That's not serving the students, right? And we have less free speech on campus. That's what you're supposed to go to college for. You're supposed to go get the conflict. You're supposed to go find out, have the arguments over every topic of, there is no right answer. There's just trade-offs. But they're not going to teach you any Thomas Sowell in college either.
No, but it does sound like it's more to serve the college, the business, than it is the student. As you're, the further you're talking here, is it a myth that debt is required to get a degree unless your parents can afford to pay for school? I want to point everyone over to our Substack. It's free. Go to metalsandminers.substack.com. We post free content on the consumer, economy, markets, artificial intelligence, individual metals and miners, and every single expert interview that we conduct, just like this one. They're all up there. And when you subscribe, we want to give you a free gift. It's a report that we wrote. It's based on the important Ray Dalio foundational premise. It's titled, "If You Don't Own Gold, You Know Neither History Nor Economics." This free gift is a must-read for everyone on why we all should own gold. So head over to metalsandminers.substack.com, put in your email address, and receive the free gift on us. Also, I'm positive that you've enjoyed the conversation with David as much as I have. Would you please let him know? Hit the like and subscribe button and leave a comment below the video.